A man who's been called everything from a rebel outlaw to a national treasure. A man who's written timeless songs, inspired generations, and outlived just about every headline predicting his downfall. He's tied to Americana like barbecue and pickup trucks, yet he's managed to challenge the establishment over and over again. That man, of course, is Willie Nelson. His music may be the first thing people think of. The unmistakable twang, those lyrics that seem to always soundtrack. A road trip at dusk, but Willie's real story isn't just about strumming his guitar. It's about survival, reinvention, and somehow laughing at the brink of collapse before climbing back on stage the next night. Willie's career arc looks almost like folklore. He starts as a struggling musician working odd jobs to scrape by, eventually, penning one of the biggest country hits ever, Patsy Cline's Crazy. He moves from being a behind-the-scenes songwriter to a charismatic songwriter-performer in his own right, gifting the world everything from On the Road Again to Blue Eyes Crying, In the Rain. And while his discography would be enough to carve him into history, Willie didn't stop there. He became instantly recognizable not just because of his voice, but because of that image, the red bandana, the wispy braids, and a certain smoke-filled aura that became as much a part of his identity as his guitar trigger. His entire essence was so unique, it even got woven into movies like the 1984 film Songwriter. He's larger than life. And yet, his humanity is painfully clear when you look at the battles he's fought. Not just musically or politically, but physically. The truth is, Willie has been through a lot when it comes to health. You'd almost swear his lungs deserve their own chapter in his biography, considering how much drama they've been through. In fact, Willie once admitted that as a young man, he started his smoking habit with cedar bark. Yes, cedar bark, not exactly the recommended start for a long, healthy life. From there, he graduated to cigarettes, eventually earning his reputation as country's patron saint of marijuana. But, by his own admission, that nearly cost him everything. By 2019, he stated plainly that his lungs were just about ready to pack up and leave, forcing him to rethink habits that had become inseparable from his legend. He could no longer walk into a cloud of smoke with invincibility. And when he finally announced he was stepping back, cutting back from smoking to focusing on edibles, it was almost like hearing Superman admit that kryptonite was real. For decades, Willie had been the ultimate smoker, a friendly challenger to Snoop Dogg himself for the throne. It seemed unthinkable that he would ever stop. But in his own way, he did what he's always done, adjusted just enough to keep going. He even started his own branded cannabis ventures alongside his wife Annie, because why wouldn't Willie Nelson create his own line of THC tonics? He jokes that Annie does most of the work, and he just nods. But you know darn well his laid-back charm is as big a selling point as the product. The lung troubles didn't start at a concert or even from lighting. Back in 1981, while swimming in Maui, Willie suffered a collapsed left lung. Imagine this. One of the most unstoppable forces in music, laid low not by a grueling tour, but by a family vacation dip in the ocean. Doctors had to insert a tube in his chest to help him heal. And yet, right around that same period, Willie was thriving musically with On the Road Again winning a Grammy, and even snagging an Oscar nomination as part of Honeysuckle Rose. Talk about highs and lows in the same season. That incident turned out to be just the beginning of health complications tied closely to his lungs. Fast forward to 2004, and it wasn't just breathing that became a problem, it was his hands. Decades of guitar playing caught up with him through severe carpal tunnel syndrome, forcing him into surgery. The thought of Willie Nelson not being able to play is like imagining a cowboy without his horse. But once again, he bounced back. He always does. It's a pattern. Physical breakdown, adjustment, then stubborn return. Like an old oak tree that somehow weathers storm after storm, he bends but doesn't break. Sometimes it wasn't long-term wear and tear, but sudden, frightening health. Scares that rattled even his fans. There was that 2012 hospitalization in Colorado, when altitude combined with emphysema stole his breath and left a full audience waiting for a show that never came. For someone who'd made smoking part of his identity, the word emphysema dropped. Like a hammer. It's a progressive, incurable condition, the kind that doesn't make still touring at 90 seem remotely possible. Even Willie himself admitted pneumonia and multiple lung infections had battered him over and over. But his response was never to retreat in permanent defeat. In 2015, he revealed that he had even turned to stem cell therapy as a way to give his lungs a fighting chance, something experimental, a Hail Mary at innovation. Maybe it helped, maybe it didn't, but the point was clear. He wasn't ready to stop breathing life onto a stage. By 2019, headlines swirled when he said outright, "I don't smoke anymore." Fans were whiplashed. One day he was the godfather of cannabis. The next day he claimed to be done. His team clarified with a sly wink that he still tasted the flower, but Willie's real focus shifted to how he could keep his lungs in shape another way. Singing. Think about that. In true Willie style, what could be a limitation became an excuse to work harder. He even described concerts as lung workouts, pointing out that singing for an hour is the best kind of gym routine. For him, staying on the road wasn't just a career move, it was therapy. And then came the pandemic, that universal equalizer that took down touring and silenced venues worldwide. At 89, Willie faced one of his toughest fights when COVID-19 hit him hard. He woke in the middle of the night, struggling for breath on his tour bus. He and Annie turned their ranch into a makeshift hospital, treating him with everything from monoclonal antibodies to steroids. Annie later admitted there were moments she wasn't sure he would make it. And yet, within 2 weeks, Willie Nelson was back on stage. Because of course he was. Even at 91, when fans feared the worst after tour cancellations in 2025, he strode triumphantly back at his July 4th picnic concert, met with a standing ovation that was less about the show and more about sheer relief that the man was still standing. By then, his resilience had stopped being surprising and started to feel almost supernatural. Here's what's astonishing. Even as his lungs faltered, even as surgeries, pandemics, and age tried to pin him down, Willie never slowed his output. In 2024 alone, he released his 76th studio album, his second that year, and in early 2025, another new record hit the shelves. 76 albums is an absurd number for anyone, let alone someone who's had enough health scares to fill a medical textbook. On his 90th birthday, instead of lounging in a rocking chair, he climbed on stage to perform. When asked why, his answer was so simple it was brilliant. "Working is really good for me." And if that weren't enough, Willie added yet another layer to his legend, martial arts master. After decades of training in the Korean art of Gongkwon Yusul, he earned a 5th degree black belt. Let's just pause and appreciate that. Most people in their 70s, 80s, and 90s are bragging about gardening or brisk walks. Willie Nelson is out here kicking pads and practicing breathwork in disciplines that stretch back centuries. He says it helps his lungs, his body, his mood, and you can see how that dedication overlaps with his outlook. Resilience isn't just surviving, it's training yourself to withstand what life throws. One of the most fascinating things he's ever said is that marijuana might have saved his life. It may sound counterintuitive given his lung troubles, but his reasoning is sharp. Before cannabis, it was alcohol. Heavy drinking was steering him down a violent, destructive path. Weed, as he tells it, kept him calm, made him kinder, it may have prevented him from hurting himself or someone else. You don't have to agree with him to recognize that it was part of his personal salvation. Taken all together, the hospital stays, the COVID battle, the black belt, the endless concerts, it paints a picture of a man who refuses to accept limitations. He's lived bigger than life but dealt with brutal vulnerabilities at the same time. He's been wildly reckless and astonishingly disciplined. He's wrestled with his own biology and turned it into both a reason to pause and the fuel to keep moving. The conclusion is almost poetic. Willie Nelson isn't just a musician, he's proof of endurance. He represents what it means to bend without breaking, to reinvent without losing identity. He's been battered by emphysema, scarred by surgeries, challenged by age. And yet, when the lights go up and the crowd cheers, there he is, on stage with trigger in his arms, braids dangling, singing with a voice that sounds like American history itself. To call him a survivor feels too small. Willie Nelson is a living lesson in how to face down the storms life brings, keep your humor, keep your art, and above all else, keep going.